Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm the program director at the Midtown Scholar Bookstore in Harrisburg, PA. We have a wonderful conversation ahead of us this evening. We're happy you're here and we hope you enjoy the program. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to our partnering bookstores for this evening's conversation, our friends at Books and Books in Florida, Prairie Lights Books in Iowa, and Print, a bookstore in Maine. Tonight's free event would not have been possible without them, and we ask that you please consider showing your support of these indies and Rebecca by purchasing a copy of I Have Some Questions for You from any of these stores. I'll be pasting the links in the chat room in just a moment. Some quick housekeeping. We'll have a conversation here in just a moment, then transition to audience Q&A around the 30-minute mark. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A button towards the bottom of the screen if you're on Zoom, and use the chat room if you're on YouTube Live. I'll do my best to grab the best question towards the end of the program. But at this time, I'm happy to introduce our speakers. Our interviewer this evening is Julia Whelan. Julia is a writer, lifelong actor, and award-winning audiobook narrator of over 500 titles across all genres. In 2020, AudioFile magazine gave her its Lifetime Achievement designation, a Golden Voice, a year after she won the Best Female Narrator Audie for Tara Westover's Educated. Her performance of her own debut novel, the international bestseller My Oxford Year, garnered a Society of Voice Arts Award. Her new novel, Thank You for Listening, was a Best of 2022 pick at Amazon, Audible, and NPR. Of course, our featured author this evening is Rebecca Makkai. Rebecca is the author of the novels I Have Some Questions for You, The Great Believers, The 100-Year House, and The Borrower, and the story collection Music for Wartime. A finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, The Great Believers received an American Library Association Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, among other honors, and was named one of the 10 best books of 2018 by the New York Times. A 2022 Guggenheim Fellow, Makkai is on the MFA faculties of the University of Nevada, Reno at Lake Tahoe and Northwestern University, and is the artistic director of Story Studio Chicago. Of course, the book that we are here for this evening is titled I Have Some Questions for You. It has been called an irresistible literary page-turner by the Boston Globe, and People magazine writes that it's a twisty, immersive whodunit, perfect for fans of Donna Tartt's The Secret History. Once again, look in the chat room in just a moment and purchase your copy of I Have Some Questions for You from one of our partnering bookstores. And again, we appreciate your support of indies, and we hope you enjoy tonight's conversation. Without further ado, I'm happy to hand it off to Julia and Rebecca.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. This is just fantastic. I am so glad we're able to do this. I've loved your writing forever. And I was able to narrate a couple of stories from Music Wartime. And when I saw that this offer came into me, I jumped so hard. I've been so looking forward to this book, and it not only lived up to every expectation, but just surpassed it. And I just love how you don't fit neatly into any category. You just seem to write the book you want to write at the time you want to write it. And I'm totally here for the ride. So since we're only a week out from pub, I don't want to assume that people know what this book is about. So can you give us just the elevator pitch and kind of let people know what's going on?
Yeah, the really brief one is it is a literary feminist boarding school murder mystery.
Yeah, it is.
but a little more detail. It's we have a 40-year-old woman, Bodie Kane, who is a film historian, and she is hired back just for 2 weeks to teach a class or two at her old boarding school in New Hampshire. And she arrives there, of course. When she's back, her mind is back on the mid-90s when she graduated, and specifically on the death of a young woman in their senior year, this woman, Thalia Keith, who had been her junior year roommate. Someone's in prison for that. It's a man named Omar Evans, a young Black man who was the athletic trainer at the school. He's been there for over 20 years, and the case is done. There are a lot of people online, though, who believe the wrong person's in prison. And while she's back at the school, Bodie starts to realize that they might be, in fact, right.
Great.
And
fantastic. Beautifully teed up. So one of the other things that I love about you is you're also a teacher, and you engage a lot in the actual writing craft. And so I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to ask you the where did the idea come from question, because we all just make up answers to that anyway, because there's a difference. Because there's a difference between the idea and the book.
Yes.
But I do want to ask you, do you remember which came first with this book? Was it the theme or the plot? Like, did you want to explore this kind of a murder mystery, kind of true crime thing that we need to reevaluate given distance and time? Or was this kind of reevaluation that we are experiencing as, I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, but as we get older and we look back on the culture that sort of forged us, those larger themes that you're engaging with, like, do you remember which came first, or was there an order?
Yeah, I mean, I start with plot. I really, theme for me is something that reveals itself as I go, that comes about later. It, ideally, theme is something subconscious that you're just in the same way that when you dream, that is you using narrative to tell yourself something you didn't realize you knew often. And sometimes you're just dreaming about random things, of course, right? And the same thing with a book is, I am drawn to a plot for reasons maybe I don't know. And I'm going to use that plot and 5 years of exploration to end up figuring out things that I didn't already know that I knew. And so this was like, I wanted to write a boarding school book. I wanted to do a mystery. What are these doing together? I don't know. And started really writing in 2019. There was a lot of, Me Too stuff was going on, as it still is, but really fresh. We were looking back a lot. And I was writing this book about someone looking back on high school in the 90s, and that seemed to go in as well. So the themes, I don't really even fully know what they are until I have a full draft. And then I go, oh, look what I wrote about. Huh.
That's what the book's about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, that makes sense. And it feels, that's why it feels very, it's an overused word, but it feels very organic, because it doesn't feel that you set out being like, I want to make sure people understand how I feel about this,
Right. In fact, I don't know how I feel. I contradict myself. That's my, that's my job, is to make.
But that is the privilege of being the age we are.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not convinced that we understand everything.
No kidding.
So in that vein, then there's a kind of device is a schlocky word, but I only mean it in the sense that you have a very nice framing element for this story, which is that Bodhi there's a you in the picture. There's a second person that she is addressing, and it is in hindsight, very problematic teacher at the school. Same kind of question. Do you know when that kind of came to you? Was that a late addition, or did you always think this guy is the crux of this story?
I knew that I wanted there to be that element of a kind of predatory teacher. Honestly, looking back, I think almost all of us looking back at high school in the 90s or earlier, there were lots of those stories and things that people kind of like, well, everyone knows, but then nobody's doing anything about it. And just felt like the kind of thing I really wanted to put in. The question, whether or not that was going to be a second person, that it came about pretty early, but it was not part of the original plan. I spent like 2 or 3 years always thinking about a book before I start to write. I don't think it was in my head at that point in time, but when I actually sat down to write, I started this at the Ragdale Foundation near Chicago, artist residency, and I had about 3 weeks to write. Somewhere in that time, I was trying a million things, and one of them, and it did not feel very momentous at the time, so I don't really remember why, but one of them was, okay, what if she's kind of thinking this whole thing at him? When you go someplace, sometimes, or sometimes for a certain reason, you imagine a certain person watching you, that you're in conversation with. So, if you go back to a place where you last spent time with someone, you might imagine that you're kind of in
ghosts
conversation
are still there.
with them.
Yeah.
Right. And for reasons that she doesn't fully understand when she first goes back, this guy, Mr. Block, the music teacher, is the one that she feels like she's talking to, or the one who's watching her. And so that's, the book it's not supposed to be written to him or anything like that. It's just who she's talking to.
Yeah. On that note, I think what I want to do is share with the audience. We've decided that we're going to do a couple of readings because I usually people want me to read at these things, but then I always feel slightly awkward when the author's actually here.
Yeah, right.
But I do have one section that if I had to pick something that it's not spoilery, but I think it gives you a sense of the sense of the character that we're following of Bodhi and the way that her brain works. Also just a great glimpse of the prose and my favorite line in the book. And then this turning to Mr. Block. So she's back at the school. She is trying to get some work done and some Wi-Fi. So she's gone down to a coffee shop, and she says, "A USA Today lay on the counter, smeared with someone else's coffee, the front page devoted to the same story that had been on the news the other night, the one where the men finally told about the priests decades later, and everyone lauded their bravery. The one where the women came forward after 5 years, and everyone asked why they hadn't spoken sooner. The waitress saw what I was reading. She said, 'You'd think if she was all that troubled, she'd have told the producer.' It was the one where 15 women accusing the same man of the same thing was too much of a coincidence. They must have coordinated their stories. It was the one where the witness wasn't considered credible because 6 years earlier, she'd accused another man of the same thing, and it was easier to believe she was lying than that lightning loves a scarred tree." I flung the paper down, went back to Rita, but I couldn't focus. I could walk to campus and use Granby Wi-Fi to watch the video, but the combination of dread and cold, every time the door opened, a polar draft found me, made that prospect less than appealing. The croissant they'd warmed for me was astonishingly good, sourdough with a crackly crust. I dropped crumbs in every direction. I decided to Google you.
Thank you. I love hearing you read. Oh my God, it makes me so happy.
I can't get over those. Another thing that you use so beautifully is kind of distilling every hot button news story that we all get obsessed with very briefly, and then it leaves when we get obsessed with the new thing, and all of these stories kind of blend together, and they're all these just human tragedies that just disappear into the wind. And you do such a beautiful job of, without being specific about any one real incident, reminding us that there's always one of these, and we are always, the obsession with the dead, particularly white girl, and that just we don't focus long enough to even begin to grapple with the implications or the situations that come out of these situations. We just, oh wow, we watch the train wreck and then we move on.
Yeah. And it's, there are sections like that's a repeating motif. There's sections like that throughout the book, basically with her refusing to narrow it down to one story and just saying, like, it was all of them, just, I'm not going to tell you which one it was. It came about as a solution to a problem for me, in that I wanted there to be a story on the news that was really upsetting her and throwing her off. But I didn't want to pick a real one. I didn't want to have it just say like, oh, it's Matt Lauer or it's Christine Blasey Ford. And I also didn't want to invent one and then take steam away from the main story. So this was something I tried. And then I kept it because it worked for me. It was like, the sense of like
worked.
Deluge, you're standing under the waterfall.
And you have that moment as a reader where I think you're like, is this real or is this not real? And there's a combination of things. You're like, this absolutely is one of them, or this is, I missed this one. This is one I hadn't heard about,
Yeah, some of them are
has
made
a great effect. And that's great because that's what it feels like. You're like, what case are we talking about?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Totally.
You also happen to write probably the best fictionalization of a Twitter main character event that I've seen. And what I particularly just like personally adore about this is that you're one of my favorite people on Twitter.
Thanks.
Because I think you know how to do it right. So in the situation that, do you want to set up what the situation is? So in contrast to our kind of A story, there's a B story that challenges our main character to kind of look at a similar situation, but that she is closer to and has very different opinions about.
Yeah, that's basically
and using the
it, right?
lens of the craziness of Twitter was a very smart choice.
Yeah, it's basically, you know, her husband, and at the same time that she's looking back on extreme things, like this person was literally murdered, and things, you know, close to that on the spectrum of this was a predatory teacher, but then like also, what about the kid who harassed me in the hall every day? And then in her life, there's, you know, her ex-husband, who she's friendly with. There's a woman on Twitter, she's basically made a performance art piece about him. And people are then accusing him of, you know, being a predator when, to at least to this character, she's going, even if I believe everything you said, this is just a bad relationship. You know, there's a 10-year, whatever, 15-year age difference, but you're both adults. So how does that work? And she gets into a lot of hot water then responding, and it's in the middle of everything. It makes everything worse. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, weirdly, to write Twitter. I was
No, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. I had a scene in my book where I had to write an audition scene, and I was like, oh, I did it in like 10 minutes. I was like, I know exactly what this feels like. And I could feel you bringing everything about Twitter to bear on that story.
Yeah.
And I love it so much. And it definitely made me Irish goodbye that site. I was on a hiatus anyway. And then I read your book and I was like, yeah, I'm not going back.
Oh
so
my
thank
God.
you for that.
Good. You're welcome.
I think another thing that I really appreciate, kind of in that vein of like, you can look back on an event and have the clarity of time and your own personal growth, and also realizing how the cultural conditioning that goes into how we just accepted things that should have been unacceptable.
Yeah.
And I say this in honestly the best way, but this book made me feel like officially old, but in a positive way, in the way that I mean, when I think as we get older, I've found that I like to take on the kind of lens, the view of a younger generation, and like look back on things and see exactly where the problems were and understand where the progress is. And there's so much about the younger generation that I respect. And then I also feel, being older and having that sense of like, yes, but my experience of seeing the world and of being a human in it for this amount of time has given me the sense of when things feel true or not. And I just felt like you reflected that moment in our lives and our evolution so beautifully. And is that a task that you were conscious of as you were writing this, kind of just dealing with the perspective shift of that, like transferring from one generation to another?
Yeah. I mean,
Amazing.
it's something, you know, basically, you know, I have her going back, you know, to teach, and it's 2018, and there's, you know, just going to have to deal with this generational divide. And it wasn't, you know, this isn't the reason that I did that. But as soon as I have her coming in, she was class of 95, which is what I was. These kids who are class of 2018, the contrasts there are striking. Of course, there's a lot of similarity, right? And these kids don't totally have their act together, but just, you know, the things that not only she put up with, but the things she took part in, realizing these kids would be appalled by
rightfully so.
Rightfully so. And it just helps to highlight that. And there's so much that's in here about perspective and looking back and realizing that you might not have fully understood what you saw at the time, or you know, your memory is not the same as someone else's. Can you trust your memory? There's a lot of kind of shifting lenses throughout the book. But you know, there's this moment for all of us where you look back and you go, wait a second, when did my high school yearbook become history? Like, I thought, you know, I didn't think that much had changed. And then you look at the pictures and you go, oh my God, what were we wearing? What were we doing? What?
And they're starting to wear it again.
Yes, yes.
Should have held on to everything.
Right,
what
right.
We're doing.
Yeah.
You have something a section that you would like to read. Can you?
It's actually perfect. I'll set you up, and this is kind of about that shifting perspective.
So yeah, okay, right. I wish I could take credit for that, but yeah.
Right, no, totally. This is a slightly longer section, but not too much longer. Basically, so Mr. Block, this music teacher, every year would direct something. I don't even fully explain it. Something called Follies. That seems like some kind of musical review show, and Bodhi, the main character, is always running lights and things like that. And Thalia Keith is the young woman who is going to wind up dead. And there's rumors about Thalia and this music teacher. So I'm going to read this one little section. I thought of the Follies rehearsal senior year when we were all called out of the theater by Bent Jensen, our Danish exchange student. You might not remember Bent, who was only there 1 year. The reason I remember him myself is that he was gorgeous, an unquestioned fact. A swoop of blonde hair that looked drawn on, a chin cleft. Bent was late to rehearsal that night, and when you asked why, he'd stood there, embarrassed and wide-eyed, and explained that he didn't quite know how to say, but there were lots of little UFOs outside. And as soon as the words were out, he reddened, but everyone was ready to believe him, already out of their seats, already jumping off the stage, you calling after us with fake upset that masked your real upset. We tumbled outside and stood on the steps on the sidewalk below, staring out at the empty hill behind the theater, the one where the off-season baseball boys would play wiffle ball. It was still the tail end of summer, but late enough that full New Hampshire dark had descended. There were, Bent said, and he seemed to try unsuccessfully to laugh at himself. There were 100 little, I don't know what, there. And he pointed in triumph to the sudden illumination of dozens of tiny flickering lights at the forest's edge. Dude, someone said, you've never seen fireflies? Apparently he hadn't. Poor Bent hadn't even heard of them, was completely new to the idea that a living thing could illuminate like that. I remember in the hilarity that followed thinking that I understood, that my God, if you'd never known something like this existed, yes, your mind would jump to the nearest, strangest, most terrifying associations. I'm going to skip a tiny bit just to get to the good parts. We filed back in to find you still at the piano, which Thalia leaned on like a torch singer. She alone had stayed back. Carlotta was in Follies that year, singing Adelaide's Lament in a campy New York accent, undercut by the Virginia one she couldn't shake. She whispered before I went back up to the booth, someone was doing a mating dance of her own. Back in the dorms later, the story stretched to include, had we seen it or not, the details of your cheeks burning red, you wiping at your neck as if to rub lip gloss off. And I'm going to skip again. When I still taught at UCLA, I used the firefly story in lectures as an example of the uncanny valley, although I have to admit it's a terrible one. Sometimes I used it to illustrate the way our brains fill gaps, the way we use what references we have. Sometimes it was about false assumptions. It wasn't lost on me, though I never included this detail, that Carlotta and I had done the same thing, looking at you and Thalia and filling in the lurid details that would make the story better later. We thought we knew, so we became certain we knew. It became as real to us as those lightning bugs, their mating dance at the tree line, our laughter, Bent's good-humored relief, our feet hitting the earth as we raced to catch them for him, bringing him miracles in our cupped hands.
I just have goosebumps. It's just so good.
Thank you.
It's so good. Which just brings me to an incidental question. Have you ever taught film?
No.
Can you please?
I
would really like to be in a film class of yours.
I don't know nearly as much about it as it sounds like from the book. I would love to be more of a film buff than I am. But I have kids, time, whatever. And so I ended up, I did a lot of research actually on film history for the book, watching film documentaries about the history of film and figuring out what Bodhi would be teaching in a class like this.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We have some great questions. There's always that moment where you're like, is anyone going to ask anything? But we have an awesome audience. So Pam would like to know, how have you changed as a writer since your first novel?
Ooh, wow. Yeah, because my first novel, first of all, it came out in 2011, but I've been working on it for 10 years before that. I definitely know my own process better. I'm more efficient. It's not that the books get easier because I make new challenges for myself, but I know myself better. I know how to outline. I know not to completely doubt myself the whole way. I still will, but I'll get through it a little quicker this time. I think that, if nothing else, I just know more about life. I'm older than I was, so that changes you in a lot of ways. I think I'm a lot less afraid of wading into the muck. I don't feel like I need to make some certain point. I'm my job is more to take, questions I already have and then complicate those questions and live in them, rather than to come down with a certain answer. I think those are probably the main things. Definitely just my writing practice. That first book I wrote, I had no idea if anyone would ever read it. I didn't know if I was deluding myself. You never know, of course, right? But to go ask, was teaching full time and then have a baby and to go, honey, can you watch the baby for 3 hours? I need to go to Starbucks and write. And of course, my husband was completely supportive of this, but then what if that's only a hobby, and then what am I doing? And it's the kind of things that, I know that every writer goes through. But at this point, there might be more pressure, but there's also just this understanding that people are waiting for my next book, and I can probably do this. And it's, it's my career. It's not this thing that I don't, I'm not sure about.
Yeah. More pressure, but more security.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Mary wanted to know, did you spend any time at a boarding school, either as part of your education or to research this book?
Okay, so I live on campus at the boarding school where my husband teaches. Long story, but so I met my husband on the East Coast. I dragged him back to Chicago, and the place he got the job, because he was a teacher, was at the boarding school I attended as a day student. So I live at my high school, and I have for 20 years. And so I'll show you, since we're on Zoom. This is my office. That's the door to my apartment. This is the door to a dorm of 40 teenage girls. I don't work here. I have nothing to do with it. I hardly ever see them, but I sure do know the boarding school world. And then also, to be honest, kind of more useful in some ways as I was writing, boarding schools, just like, independent schools, high schools, just like colleges, bring in visiting writers. And so I ended up, spending time on campus at various East Coast boarding schools, which is what I'm writing about here. Partly just so that I don't end up writing about this one. I needed to bend way far over backwards to make sure that was clear.
Yeah. Yeah, understandable, but you do know what you're writing about.
I do. There was a lot of other stuff I needed to research, but the boarding school life was not one of those things.
Courtney is asking us, what is the partnership or collaboration like between author and audiobook narrator? And from your end, I'm actually curious about that, because so this was a book done by, this is a PRH, Penguin Random House book, and it's the audio side of PRH works unlike most other publishers, which is that I actually am given a director as opposed to working alone in my studio. So I actually have someone else facilitating conversation with the author in ways I don't usually. So we didn't actually talk before I recorded, but I had questions for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I want to talk about this for sure. So from my point of view, what usually happens is that the audio director kind of floats some ideas and is like, I was thinking about this actor. In this case, it was not only that, but something that I was very pleased with because I'd been thinking this all along. And then the producer thought the same way. What if we had this one actor for almost all the book, and then we got someone else to read this one chapter? It's so J.D. Jackson, another author, to be the voice of Omar Evans. This is the guy who's in prison, just for the one chapter. I was thrilled with that. And basically,
He also has like the voice of my dreams.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. So they, then they sometimes they're like, here are 7 ideas, or here are like clips from 4 people. With my second novel, they actually had people like kind of audition, like read the first chapter. More recently, it's more like, how about Julia? And then if I didn't know who you were, I would have followed up, but I did know who you were. And I had just listened to Thank You for Listening, which was not only your book, but your voice. So, and I had listened to Gone Girl, like I put it all together. I'm like, oh my God, of course. And so I'm just saying yes, basically. And then, oh my God, I hope she says yes. And then they come at me with questions, a whole lot of pronunciation questions.
And because in your book specifically, so this is tied to something that you did, which I think is super cool, but you have quite the array of names in this book because.
Well, partly because, right. So this book was going to have a lot of names anyway, because you look back at high school, you remember all these names, and it's kind of first name, last name, and they're so evocative for you. And I just wanted it kind of peppered with those, not people you need to keep track of, just people who are mentioned. So a few years ago, I did this thing where it was like, I think what it was Amazon Prime Day. And I was like, I would like to support independent bookstores today. So if you buy a book from an indie and send me the receipt, show me the receipt, and you want me to, I'll name a character after you in my new book, a minor character. So I had all these beautiful names to use. The funny thing is, I often did not know how to pronounce them myself. So I'm just like, well, the way I've been saying it in my head is this. I don't know if that's right. Other ones, I completely came up with myself, but it's a very, like, there are a lot of names.
So we mutually apologize if I pronounced anyone's real name incorrectly in this book.
Right.
But yeah,
but there were so many, and then like place names, things like that too. But it was mostly people names that we needed to, and I had to go through.
And I think on my end, I think there were some accent. You kind of threw in some accents occasionally in there that adds a nice like dimension to the campus novel thing, and so that was kind of just part of my process. But But yeah, in this situation, all my questions were answered, and I was able to just get in there and read the book and enjoy every moment of it. Allison says, I'm halfway through the audiobook and absolutely loving it. Speaking of independent bookstores and audio, if people want to download audio, they can do so through Libro FM, and you can pick which bookstore you want to, independent bookstore you want to have that purchase benefit. So,
and it's a better app than Audible too. So
it's actually a really highly functional, great app.
Yeah.
And so just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, I'm always curious about the revision process. So I'd love to hear what the biggest difference was between the first draft and the final.
It's the thing is, first draft, it's like, well, I'm going to get like 30% of the way in and then go back and change everything and then change everything. And then I'm going to get like 50% and change everything. So it's not like, draft 1, where that might be the case for a short story. And there are authors who work that way. I can tell you the biggest difference between my conception of the book and where I've ended up, which is that I'm not giving too much away here. As it stands, the last quarter of the book is a few years later, and people are all convening in a hotel in this smallish city in New Hampshire for a legal proceeding. And they're sequestered, but also trapped together. And it's like the world's weirdest high school reunion. That was my original idea for the whole book, was what if we just trapped all these people in a hotel and they had to deal with all this stuff. And so that was the first things that I wrote were Bodhi arriving at this hotel with her suitcase, and some of that made it into the final draft. And then pretty quickly realized it was just too much backstory to get in there. I not only had to tell you everything that happened in the 90s, but everything that happened recently to get us to this point. So I just needed to back up. And
Right.
I thought it was like, oh, I'll just have like a prologue of a few years earlier, which turned into 3/4 of the book. So, whoops.
That's super interesting though. Okay, Mira, what writing challenges were more apparent in writing this mystery plot as opposed to writing other non-mystery literary novels? Also a very good question.
It is, yeah. You know what's funny? The challenges of this book didn't really have much to do with it being a mystery. I feel like every book is a mystery. You know, it's just the question is it a mystery about the past or about the future? And most often it's about the future, like what's going to happen or what's happening now. So you're still worth, thinking really hard about the rate of reveal and what do people know and when do they know it and what seeds did I plant and what's my timeline. That stuff was actually pretty similar. The challenges had more to do with things like, how am I going to get all these memories in when I'm also questioning the reliability of memory? I don't want to do that thing where someone is like peeling a hard-boiled egg and they have a memory and it's like 17 pages of complete chronological memory with all the details, like the air smelled like almonds that day. What? That's not how memory works.
I don't want to narrate that either, so thank you.
No, exactly. I don't want that. And I also didn't want to jump back and forth in time, if only because my last book did that, in terms of the real, the narrator going back in time in some other way. So that was the main challenge. How do I do that? And other challenges that were just unique to the book, but the mystery part, it was challenging, but it wasn't challenging in any significantly different way than working out timelines and reveals and all that for a plot that's not a mystery plot.
Yeah, plot problems are plot problems.
Right. Yeah.
A quick question for me that I will very briefly answer. What issues do you see with new audiobook narrators? What do you wish you would have known before you started narrating audiobooks? Just what advice can you give to a newbie with having completed over 500 books?
I thought I want to know this too.
Well, here's the thing, and I having an acting background is great, and having emotional accessibility is key, and bringing all of that sensibility, feeling like you're seeing a film in your head when you're narrating it is important. But I think what I tell newer narrators to focus on is to read the book like a writer. I had a really wonderful creative writing teacher who kind of on the first day of class said, like, I'm not sure I can teach you how to write, but I can teach you how to read like a writer, and to try to figure out what a writer is going for, what they are doing, to analyze a text, to understand how they're using motif, how they're using repetition, how they're using foreshadowing, the way they're using dialogue. Be very sensitive to what the writer is trying to accomplish, because at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's not about your performance. It's about doing this adaptation between the author and the listener. And therefore, you are the steward of this book, and you need to be putting yourself in the writer's position more than the actor's position.
I love that.
Would be
oh my God, that's amazing.
Okay. No, I think we can do this, Laura. I'm not 100% if this is a spoiler, so feel free to edit, but I think we're okay. When you started writing, did you know who killed Thalia? Or was this something that you discovered along the way?
Yeah, no, the fact that Thalia has been killed is not like some big spoiler.
Yeah, no, I mean,
so yeah, we're good. I did. I think it would have worked to go the other way too. I do have friends who are more traditional mystery writers, like, detective series kind of mystery writers. And they do tend to say that it helps them to know from the beginning, to just like work out, okay, what literally happened, and then go from there. And in this case, I did it. It's not so much that I needed to, but I just knew. I knew the timeline of the night and how this particular thing went down. And then, the discovery for me along the way, of course, was what that person was like, exactly why this happened. And also who else could have possibly done it? So Bodhi throughout the narrative has these sections where she tries to really think through what this could have looked like. So she starts with Omar Evans, the man who's in prison, and goes, okay, if he did this, what would that have been like? And then goes through, okay, but what about this classmate, this female classmate that people point to on the internet? Could she have done it? How would that timeline work? What would that be? And she goes through some that are impossible. She goes through, what if I did it myself? Which is, she's not saying.
Which I love. I love that section though.
Yeah. Those ones all needed working out in a different way. And I would have been willing, I think if I'd found something along the way that worked better, I would have been willing to jump ship and do that. But in the end, I won't say, there's stuff I want to say here that I won't, but I'll say very cryptically, I think this is where it had to land.
Yeah. Patrick has a question that I think he typed it before we had gotten to the last question, but I want to circle back to say, he says, the Great Believers so seamlessly transitions between time frames. While I have some questions for you, has Bodhi more constricted to her own time and relying on her memory?
Yeah.
What was it like to write backstory in such a unique way for the new book? So I'm going to tailor, Patrick, forgive me, but your question a little bit to say, did you learn something from writing the Great Believers in the way that you did that made you decide what you did about the backstory and flashback stuff that you were talking about in the couple previous questions?
Yeah, it's not like I went, oh my God, that was a mistake, I'm never doing that again. Because I do think that it was what I needed for the Great Believers. But it was specifically suited to that book. I had for the Great Believers, I started out writing it entirely in the 1980s. And I got about 100 pages in and went, this is not working like this. I need this echo of decades. I need someone 30 years later looking back, and it's going to be a different person. And, in this case, it's a first person narrative. So to jump back if we jumped back in time, would it be to her narrating this at 17, or would it be third person, or would it be someone else? Could have happened. We could do that.
Did you try it different ways, or did you just went with it?
No, I made the decision that I was like, what, a mystery can, one of the reasons a mystery is the limitations of knowledge. And in real life, we are trapped in one point of view, and we are trapped in the present. We might live in the past and the future all the time, right? But we can only ever see what's in front of us. And that sense of entrapment is something I needed, in the same way that I was like going to trap them all in a hotel, which happens, but not as much as my original plot. I think the real trap here, the hotel would have been a fun trap, but the more important trap is the trap of the present, and just not being able to revisit, not being able to go back there. Time is always thematic for me. My second novel is a book called The 100-Year House, and it goes backwards over the 20th century, one estate. And there's a lot of different narrators and different things going on there. So it's just another way. This was rather than playing with time, it was like I think in The 100-Year House and in The Great Believers, I was letting narrative do the things that real people can't by jumping around in time. And sort of in reaction to those, just, hey, I want to do a different thing now. I was replicating the things that time really does to people. Yeah.
I mean, and what a trick to be able to do that, because that's one of the most misunderstood things. Quick question. How did your research process for this book compare to your previous novels? You talked a little bit about that, but is it easier to take knowledge from your personal life or from other people's experiences and translate them?
Yeah. I mean, it's both, right? So in terms of how they related, The Great Believers in particular was a very research-heavy novel. So this was, AIDS epidemic, 1980s. I needed to have one-on-one interviews with people who had lived through this in Chicago in specific, because there was a lot out there written about New York, San Francisco, next to nothing about Chicago. That was mountains of research. This one, the boarding school thing, I didn't need to research, but I needed to do a lot of research on the New Hampshire legal system, the New Hampshire carceral system. That was the main thing. I needed to do like research on film history, also research on rowing crew.
But how much research did you need to do about 1995 boardings? Like, how much of that did you remember, and how much of that were you like, how did we get by without cell phones, or how did we, I mean, you always have those questions. You're like, what were we doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think I actually have a pretty strong memory, pretty strong experiential memory.
That's great.
So, but I pulled out my yearbooks for sure, just for like, not to find characters or anything, but just like, what were we doing? What were we...
Memory, yeah.
Yeah. I made a Spotify playlist it was music. It was all music from 1994.
Yes.
So I figured like, they're in the woods. They're not really up to date. Totally.
Right.
They don't get to the CD shop that often. So yeah, I was doing things like that, but it is, that is very prominent in my memory. They do that psychological research that we just have a lot more memories from adolescence than from any other time in our life. And
it's true, because everything's new, right? Everything's a new memory.
Yeah. And they tend to be really detailed, and we tend to like be able to remember what year a song came out. They're like, oh, I know it came out this year because I was at this party and this person said this. Like, what else? Everything since then is one big blur, right? But no, the New Hampshire stuff, the judicial stuff, that was, I wanted to write a realist novel. The project of this book is like, okay, let's take one of these true crime cases, the kind of, not true, it's fictional, but the kind of case that would tend to capture the public imagination for better or worse. And let's actually look at it through a realist lens. What would this actually be like? What's the wrongful incarceration part of this? What's the Innocence Project part of this? What does a shoddy police investigation really look like? And so I found a wonderful, this woman who was working as, until very recently, as a public defender in New Hampshire. And she just gave me everything. It was amazing.
Fantastic. Wow. Okay, everyone, I've got a couple more questions, but if anything else is coming to you, just drop them in, because we're going to be wrapping up. From Bev, how are you juggling your writing process with the business of being an author? Publication, marketing, publicity, so that it all works for you?
Yeah, it's tricky because like
assuming it all works for you.
Yeah. Right now, oh my God, I might get to write a little bit on tour, but especially the lead up to publication is all these interviews and essays and just, and then now there's going to be travel, or there will be again. Tomorrow morning, I leave for 18 days on the road, and I am not going to check a bag. I don't know how this is going to work, but anyway,
that is my thing. My one hobby is travel packing. I am an expert on this. I can, you're not giving me much time, but leaving 8 a.m, but I could have completely.
I could have come out here and helped. Yeah. But it's kind of overwhelming. I think the thing, it's so funny because I have so many students, novel writing students, who are like, well, I have this full-time job right now, but if I can just publish my novel and then I can be a full-time author, then I can just write all the time. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you're successful, you now have another full-time job, which is being an author, and that's separate from the writing. And it's not always full-time, of course, right? But the better things are working, the more you have readings, you have travel, you have just so many emails. Oh my God, the emails. And some of them are like from readers or something, that's delightful, but that's not what I mean. It's just the publicists, the marketing team, like editors, right. Like, and once I'll be like, okay, wait, it's like a holiday. No one's going to bother me from New York. But then I realize it's not a holiday in London. And then my UK publicity team, and I'm not complaining, to be clear. It's just,
no, everyone understands that. Everyone understands that, but it's a lot. When you are responsible for the thing, you are responsible for the product going out in the world, and everything has to be run through you. This is there's no corporate structure here. So,
right. The thing, so just really quickly, in terms of the balance, like, it's
Oh,
just,
yeah.
you got to realize you have seasons. Like, this is not the time to expect myself to write a lot. And it's okay. And you know, you don't need to write every day. You can take weeks off, you can take months off, you can probably even take years off, although that may not be a good idea. And then get back to it, and it's fine.
And it might
And you
actually be better. It might actually help.
yeah, you
actually.
let the field lie fallow a little bit. It can help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julie would like to know, can you describe what you're working on next, or still early days?
I can hint at what I'm working on next. I can be
Okay.
cryptic. I'll say, so I was lucky enough to get a Guggenheim Fellowship this last year, and I used it for.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I used it for travel. I went to Germany this fall. I'm writing about 1930s Germany in part. It's not a Holocaust novel. It's not a World War II novel. It's not avoiding those things either, but it's something else. And so I've, been just a lot of research, very little writing, but a lot of research at this point. And hopefully gonna really, really dig in this summer is my plan. So
great. I'm excited. And a question of just, were there any other titles that were considered for this book?
Yeah. The working title, Forever and Ever, was 95, as in the year, but like maybe spelled out. And it didn't do the work of telegraphing the mood or the subject or much else. So then, my agent and editor were basically like, yeah, no, but then we didn't have an alternative. And we spent months trying to figure this out, and we're getting almost a copy edits. And it happened on this title. It is and was the first sentence of a chapter quite late in the book. And I was, flipping through. One of the things you do when you're searching for a title is you manically flip through your manuscript. Like, is there anything in here that someone says?
Somebody pick a page number.
Right. It worked for me that it has that direct address in it, which is part of the book.
Yeah.
It gets at things thematically, it gets at the mystery aspect. I feel like it's a little bit, it includes the reader in that you. And so once you start realizing that it has multiple functions, that's when it might work.
Oh, it's great. I mean, yeah, when it works on multiple levels, solid.
Yeah,
okay, I think our final question from Amanda, and this is just, I like this perfect question to end on, but what is your favorite recent read? Like, what is filling you right now?
Okay, so I'm doing this project right now where as a memorial to my father, who was, among other things, a literary translator. I am reading my way around the world in translation, kind of Amazing Race style. I started in
where
Hungary.
can people follow you doing this?
Yes. So I'm doing this social media, Twitter, etc. Also in my Substack, which you can find because I have an unusual name, but it's actually, it's called Submack. So SUBMAKK, because someone on Twitter named it. I couldn't think of anything better. Anyway, I started in Hungary. I'm going to end in Hungary because my father was Hungarian, and doing 84 books because that's how many years he lived. And I'm 7 books in. So I've gotten down to Turkey, and now I'm going to do the Arabian Peninsula and then down the east coast of Africa and then over. But my 2 favorites so far, one was my Hungarian book, the first one, which was The Door by Magda Szabo. Wonderful. It's about a woman's really intense relationship with her house cleaner. It's great. And then I just read Madonna in a Fur Coat by Sabahattin Ali, Turkish novel. It's from the 1940s and made no splash at all in the 40s, but within the past 2 or 3 years has become a massive bestseller in Turkey out of nowhere. And
was it like TikTok found it? How did this happen?
I kind of like Turkish Bookstagram. I don't know. It's partly, I don't know. I think it was word of mouth. It's a pretty unconventional love story. And I think there's sort of this is young readers in Turkey really responding to a very oppressive president in terms of gender norms and roles and things like that. Finding something in this book that was also written under a very oppressive regime. And in fact, the author was murdered by the government. in the 1940s. So there's this whole story to it.
Oh,
But I really loved that. And so yeah, if anyone, I have a lot of people reading with me, just various, not every single book, but the ones that they want to. So if anyone wants to join me, it's been fun. And I'm reading slowly. I'm not reading too fast for anyone to keep up because I've been very busy.
yeah, great, wonderful. Thank you everyone for asking such terrific questions. Hello, welcome back.
Yeah, I'm just going to close us out here. Congratulations, Rebecca. Very exciting. I have some questions for you. Here it is. Thank you, Julia. This was just a really wonderful conversation.
Absolutely.
One last shout out to our indie bookstores. You should have the links in the chat room. Please purchase your books from indie bookstores. They both, or all of us, can ship, and all of us have the book available for in-store pickup as well. Thank you to our audience members. We had a lot of great questions tonight, so thanks to you all, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. Rebecca, I'm just going to kick it back to you for the last word.
Yes, good. Thank you. I was like, you're not going to take this out without letting me say thank you, are you? So yeah, no, Julia, thank you not only for this, but I mean, this is your book too. This really, I know how much of a difference this makes, and to have, you become the voice of the book for so many people. It's the voice they hear when they think of the character, and I just couldn't think of a better reader.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me do it.
Yeah. Oh. And thank you to these 4 beautiful bookstores. I love all of them. And like Julia said, if you're an audio listener and that's why you're here, if you don't have the Libro FM app, it's just libro.fm. It's on your phone, and then go to the website, you download the books. It works the exact same way as the big gross one. And it's a better app, and you can just pick a different indie every time, or pick the same indie every time. And it's great. So thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.